So welcome. I'm so glad to see that people are coming out to exercise. You're coming out to exercise your civic duty and your civic responsibility. Back in the 70s, we went from being citizens to consumers. So this is an opportunity for us to exercise that right. If we don't exercise that right, others will exercise it for us. And there's nothing more clear about that than the judicial system. So the role of the DA is very important, the role of prosecution and the judicial system. And I know that a lot of that you know because you're here. So I'd like to open up by just thanking Ricardo Moncrief, and ISOJI for sponsoring this event. Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you, Ricardo. Indivisible Sausalito for helping to put this on, and Lisa Bennett, thank you. Mill Valley Community Action Network. These are the people who came together. And the Marin City Community Services District for providing us the space and the facility, which is very much appreciated. So my name is Oshala Diana Marcus, and I'm just happy to be here. I grew up in this community. I consider myself a local citizen, a national citizen, and an international citizen, and even a cosmic citizen. So I have all those concerns with being a citizen. So I want to also welcome our distinguished panel. So we have AJ Brady, and when I say your name, you can just say AJ Brady, who are running for the office of District Attorney. We have Anna Pletcher and Lori Frugoli.
How you doing?
Thank you for being here, and thank you for giving us this opportunity to have a town hall meeting, to have transparency for our civic process. We really do appreciate it. So for those of your friends who are not here, you can tell them that they can see this on Marin TV. So encourage, post it on your Facebook page. If people are really interested in this position, spread it for those that aren't here. So I'm just going to jump in with our 3-minute statements to the following question. And either one of you can jump in with it. So we're asking our candidates to begin with a 3-minute statement to the following question. And the question is, what programs and policies would you implement as a DA to reduce crime and increase safety in Marin County? Ms. Pletcher is going to be our first person to answer.
Thank you all for coming out on a Saturday morning to be here to hear about the district attorney's race. I'm excited to be jumping right in with the first question, and I'm going to start by asking everyone if you know that it has been 20 years since we've had a contested district attorney election in Marin County. It has been more than 70 years since someone from outside this DA's office has had that top job. 1934 was the last time. That is a long time to be recycling the same ideas. And I'm running to bring a fresh perspective, to bring new ideas from my 10 years as a federal prosecutor and working my way up to be assistant chief of my office, only the second woman to have that job, managing 25 attorneys. And my deep involvement in the local community, many of you know that because I've spent so much time here in Marin City in the ISOJI meetings and working with women and families in our community, from the Women's Commission to the Coalition to End Human Trafficking. And that's why, after 70 years, I'm excited to bring a new perspective. So what would that look like? What are these policies and ideas that I'm excited to bring here? Well, we need to do better focusing on victims of crimes. We need to do better for our families, and we need to bring our district attorney's office into the 21st century. And here's where we start. Let's start by protecting our victims of sexual assault by bringing rape kit examinations right here to Marin instead of outsourcing them to Vallejo. Let's start by fixing our bail system, by getting rid of money bail, which we know doesn't work. It's unfair, it's unjust, and it exacerbates the racial inequalities in our criminal justice system. Let's take on those racial inequalities. Marin County was ranked the #1 most racially unequal county in the entire state of California, led by the disparities in our criminal justice system. I'm running to fix that. Let's focus on
Anna,
our
so you
youth.
have 1 more minute, and I love it,
One
but I'm
minute?
just giving you, I'm going to give everybody a 1-minute warning.
1-minute warning. Let's focus on our youth. Let's make sure that our youth stay on the right track and that we end the school to prison pipeline by making sure restorative justice programs are accessible to every single child in Marin County, regardless of the color of their skin or where they live. Let's make sure that our schools are safe places where we know that our kids can go every day and feel comfortable. These are the kind of reforms we need to bring to Marin County because they're safer, they make us safer, stronger, and they save taxpayer money. As district attorney, these are the kinds of things that I'm going to focus on. Oh, and one more, which I can't forget. Let's not forget our environment and our protecting our environment and the environmental justice issues that go along with that, especially in a community right here in Marin City where I know that we have been fighting environmental injustice here for a long time. That's another one of my top priorities.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Anna.
you.
Really appreciate that. So AJ or Lori, do you want to jump in for this first opening statement? 3 minutes, and I'll give you a 2-minute warning.
Better? I'll get cozy, okay?
Yeah, it swings over. It swings over, yeah.
I'm just not sure. Is it working? Can you guys hear me? Okay, thank you. It has been 70 years since we had an outsider in this position, but to some degree, there's a reason for that. This job is not a figurehead position. This job is not a position for somebody who isn't going to stick it out and show their commitment to our community, which I have done for the last 28 years here as a prosecutor. I'm a lifelong resident of this county, and I've seen a lot of changes, some good, some bad. My platform from day one has been put out, and I put my information over there. My platform is on this if you open it. I think it's really important to pay attention to what my platform is. Day one, I wasn't afraid to wait and run a poll or see what the temperature is in the community. I know we have a problem. I know we have a problem with trust of law enforcement and my office and the community. I am well aware of that. I'm aware that immigrants and people in this community aren't reporting crimes because they're afraid to do so. That's why my platform is connecting the community to the courthouse. If we don't have your trust, you're not going to report crimes. We can't wait until there's a crisis in this community and then show up and wonder why we don't have community support. That's why my commitment is to being out in the community, not just here, every community. I've been down on the canal at immigrants' rights meetings, and people from there support me. Immigrants' rights advocates support me because they said, you didn't just come one time, you showed up, and we see your heart, and we know what your core is about. So that's what I'm talking about when I say connecting the community to the courthouse. I was down here during the MLK weekend celebration, and I think the most important question that was asked was, that's great that you're here today to celebrate this weekend. When are you coming back? And what are you going to do for us? And that is the problem. So I'm committed to keeping this communication open. And it won't just be me. There's going to be somebody from my office. We're going to be pairing our non-attorneys and our attorneys with somebody in the office in each community, in each city, each sheriff's office substation, each police department. And we're going to be in contact with those police officers and the community leaders so that we
Laura, you have
know
1
what
minute.
is going on. Also, a really important factor is we got a clean house in the DA's office. And I'm the only one that has the wherewithal and the strength to stand up and say that. There is a lack of equity and transparency in our office. We need to have a dashboard where you can go online at our website at any time and see what we're doing, where we're filing cases, from which communities, how they're being handled. You have a right to know that. You have a right to know what we're doing with your money. And we work for you. Your safety is our business. If we don't take care of our own equity within our own office, how can we possibly hope to step outside in the community and have your trust and think that we can put forth policies that are acknowledging equity if we can't even do it in our own house? And I'm the only one that has the wherewithal to do that. It takes experience for handling criminal cases, which I have done, experience for dealing with victims. And I am going to push for funding
Lori,
to bring
thank
those
you
start
so
exams
much.
here. Thank you.
Thank you. So, AJ, Mr. Brady.
Great. Thank you everyone for coming out. I know it's a busy Saturday. There's lots of Warriors games, the Avengers, and you've chosen to spend time on this important local election. So thank you so much. With regard to programs and policies that I would implement, I can think of two broad categories of programs and policies, and they may sound a little generic, but the first is focusing around dealing with the intersections of untreated mental illness and the criminal justice system. I've been working in this area, behavioral health and criminal justice, for the entirety of my career, and I really think it's the intersection point which we need to address first and foremost. It turns the criminal justice system on its head when you have people who are untreated, mentally ill, committing crimes. We infer that people have all of their faculties about them, and we create a system that based on penalties of dealing with these individuals, which isn't always the case. It doesn't really work when you have individuals who are untreated, mentally ill. So I've seen it. I've seen people turn from essentially smearing feces on the wall to contrite, polite, with medication, compliance over the course of months. And if the goal is to increase public safety, if the goal is to make sure that we are doing all we can for public safety, then medication compliance for those who have untreated mental illness has to be one of the top priorities for our community. It bleeds over into every other category of crime. And we can do that by utilizing carrot and stick approaches, incentivized prosecution from the DA's office to incentivize people to take medication. We can trade penalties to make sure that medication compliance goes up. We can create, on the continuum of, say, Laura's Law to mental health courts, we can create a role for our office to be one of the community partners pushing towards greater treatment. I'd say the second category of broad policies dealing with public safety are those around restorative local practices.
AJ, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. Restorative justice does need to have a greater role in our community, but I say that has to be local because I don't want to say I have a specific program for any community. Every community has their own individual problems, and you want to create programs which are locally based and organically grown out of the community so that a community can help police issues that come within that community. Restorative justice can provide that type of local community accountability. I'd like to nurture individual pilot programs in different parts of the county that reflects those local values. I think that will improve public safety and increase a feeling of ownership over the justice system that is desperately lacking.
Thank you so much. The next question has to do with mass incarceration. In California, the state of California, 59% of people awaiting trial remain incarcerated versus 32% nationally. What will you do to reduce pretrial detention? Do you support the expansion of supervised release programs? And very important, do any of these programs have an employment or economic stability component attached to it? Why don't we go with Anna?
Sure. Mass incarceration does not work. It started as a failed policy of the drug war. It does not work. It is not making us safer, and it's exacerbated the racial disparities in our country. It needs to end. Here in Marin County and as district attorney, I will do everything I can to prevent the proliferation of mass incarceration. That includes embracing programs like pretrial diversion programs, restorative justice programs, and making sure that people have the tools that they need to engage in society in a productive way. Criminalizing poverty gets us nowhere. Gets us nowhere. So to your question about supporting employment and equity and programs that support the stability of people who come into contact with the criminal justice system, absolutely. And I advocate getting ahead of this problem by investing in our communities, by investing in economic development, by supporting early childhood education.
1 more minute.
By supporting those programs that sometimes people don't see a direct connection to the safety and health of our community and to our criminal justice system, but it's there. We know how to prevent people from getting involved in the criminal justice system. We need to make those investments, and as DAI will support that and work to keep people out of our criminal justice system out of incarceration, because that's how we stay healthier. And in our community in Marin County, we can do that. We have the resources, we have the will, we just need the leadership from the DA's office to make it happen.
Okay, thank you.
So, I guess I'll go. Are you calling?
You can jump
Sure,
right in, please.
So, look, there's two questions here. One about mass incarceration generally, and then also about pretrial, time spent pre-trial. So mass incarceration, the general approach that we're going to have a massive expansion of incarceration, I agree. It has had horrible effects on the state of California, and it isn't research-backed in any way, shape, or form, which isn't to say that we don't have crimes. It isn't to say that we don't need to hold people accountability. We don't have to hold people accountable, but the length of which we hold people accountable through incarceration, either in jail or prison, needs to be meaningfully addressed, as well as how you transition individuals after incarceration back into a community so you don't have a cycle that goes over and over again. The recidivism is part of the part that drives mass incarceration, and so we need to meaningfully be investing in reentry. Reentry is broadly coined the term of reentering from incarceration back into community. Although I would like to see, everyone's talking about
One more minute.
reentry, I'd like to talk a little bit about pre-exit, because a lot of times we know individuals who are at risk for going into either the state prison system or local system, and I don't know that we do enough to prevent that when we know people are likely to be incarcerated. We should be wrapping resources around people who are at risk for long-term incarceration, not saying we'll help you come back afterwards, or maybe do that as well. But we really, if it's meaningful to us, we want to make sure that we prevent people as much as we can when we know they're at risk from going into the prison system.
Thank you, AJ. So, Lori.
Thank you.
Sonia.
I think we all agree that the prison system is broken, and it needs to be resolved. And it took a long time to create this problem. It takes a lot of changing of mindsets, and I think everyone agrees that it's time for that. The issue is, how do we go about it? Well, I do agree that we need much more resources in the issue of bail. Everybody's going to be in favor of bail reform, but it has to focus on safety, number one. It's amazing that our Board of Supervisors has given the public defender a position for a young man who works in this community and other communities, and he helps take people to job interviews, medical appointments, get them in a position where they don't have to stay in jail, or they can get out of jail before they would have ordinarily. We need two of those people in our office. And I am going to ask the board for that type of position. And I think another important factor to look at is our youth. We have got to start with our children at a much younger age, collaborating with community leaders to...
One more minute.
Okay. To make sure that we have resources for them. One thing I would like to do is demystify the Civic Center and the courthouse. I'm going to ask the Board of Supervisors for money so that we can have young men and women from our community as interns come in and work at not just at the DA's office, but also at the public defender and probation, and see what kind of job opportunities there might be, what kind of role models might they encounter along the way, to see that, there's other options in life that you might not have thought of if somebody doesn't open that door for you and walk with you through that. We have one gentleman here from my office. He has been a leader in having people from the community and schools as interns in our office, but he's the only one, and it's always been an uphill battle for him, and that needs to stop, and that's the kind of thing that I think we need to change. It does start with our youth. I'm a big supporter of our youth court. I think that's a huge component that we have just not been involved in as our DA's office, and I'm committed to that, because that does keep children out of the pipeline that can lead to prison, and that's a factor that we know.
Thank you, Lori. I want to give you each a minute to really comment on the last part of that question, which spoke specifically to employment, to the pipeline of you get into the judicial system, and we know that street crime is directly related to lack of dignity around employment, jobs, having enough money, especially in the state of California with the way that the economy is. So can you speak specifically to that last part? Do any of these programs have an economic or employment stability component attached to them? Just speak on that. Give you 1 minute.
So we don't have supervised release in Marin County. It's a huge flaw. I mean, it's hard to talk about bail reform and other things when we don't actually have supervised release. Larger agencies, larger municipalities have officers who are saying they know where people who are released pre-trial are. They know that they're going to jobs. They know that they're going to these meaningful employment opportunities. But that comes with economies of scale. My first job was working in San Diego pretrial services, so I'm familiar with that. Pending legislation may provide revenue streams for that, but we should be incentivizing people during and after the criminal justice system to have meaningful employment, not as an afterthought to incarceration or fines, but in lieu of, if what we really want to do is break those cycles.
Thank you. Thank you, AJ. Anyone? Lori or Anna, you can step in.
Sure, thank you. I think my observation of the employment issue is often boils down to the lack of opportunity on many levels, and that again goes back to my premise that we have to be out in the community doing whatever we can to give opportunities to all children and young adults in our community. I think it's really important that we support programs such as our Downtown Streets team. They're not kids, but they are adults who have come on hard times, and a lot of times people see them on the streets and they have, I don't know if you've seen them, they're in Novato and San Rafael, and they have jackets that they wear that say Downtown Streets Teams. And I had somebody say, oh, are those bad boys? Are those bad men and women? Are they in trouble? Well, no, they're not. They're actually picking up tons and tons of garbage off the streets that no one else wants to pick up. And in exchange, they get sometimes a stipend or a gift card, and it's a small step
Coming up
towards
to
them
that minute.
getting a job and also getting their dignity back. And we also have a new shower program, if you don't know, that's going to be in, or I think it is set up in San Rafael and Novato. And I think those are small steps that we can do. But again, going back to having internships,
Thank you,
bringing
Lori.
our people out here to let you see the opportunities that we have.
Thank you. Anna.
One of our greatest challenges in Marin is that we have a proliferation of nonprofits and people who are ready to help those in need, help people get employment, help them get back on the right track with support for children, for parents. But what we don't do well is consolidate those services in a way that people can actually reach them. For example, in Judge Wood's Community Court, where people can go to get infractions dismissed if they have fines piling up that they cannot pay, the judge will sit there and she'll replace those fines with community service, and then direct people to one person at County Health and Human Services who's sitting there working his tail off, trying to consolidate all of these services and refer people to the right place. I have a better idea. Out in LA right now, there's a wonderful program where they take the community court concept, but consolidate all the services in one place. It's actually a mobile unit, and it goes around to the different areas where the homeless are. But this could be translated right here to Marin in a way that we can take people who are coming out of interaction with the criminal justice system
Coming
and
up on that
provide
minute.
those centralized referred services so they can actually get them and reduce those barriers to access, use the services we currently have, and that's not going to cost taxpayers more money. All it means is a reshuffling of the way we access those services and how we use our people.
Thank you. That's excellent. It sounds, too, that this is something to be thought about, and that it sounds like the County of Marin really doesn't have something in place from the judicial system to really the pipeline in terms of employment and economic stability. So that's something that maybe we can discuss later on, but it's definitely something I know is very important to many people. I want to address corporate crime. So we tend to focus on street offenses, often forgetting about corporate crime and white-collar crime that does serious damage to people, communities, and the environment. Since fines and fees are often a big part of doing business, if you're making millions of dollars, tacking a $500 or $1,000 fine is not a big deal. Do you support sending these criminals to jail or prison? You have 2 minutes to answer that question.
I'll start with this one because that's where I spent my career doing. Many of you might know that. So I spent 10 years at the Department of Justice working on white-collar crime and prosecuting white-collar criminals, from corporate CEOs to large corporations themselves. These are complex cases that need to be built carefully. I've done it, and in a way that brings justice to consumers and to protect our American economy. For example, I prosecuted a group of real estate investors who defrauded homeowners during the home foreclosure crisis in 2008. This group of real estate investors rigged bids, depressing prices artificially, paid the auctioneers off $1,000 a day to look the other way while homeowners in Stockton were suffering. This is just one of the many cases I took to trial, got 11 plea agreements to real estate investors convicted at trial, $1 million fines, plus multi-month, in some cases multi-year jail time. We need to make sure that we enforce white-collar crime the same way that we treat any other type of crime, regardless of
One
whether
more minute,
somebody's in
Anna.
the boardroom
Doing good.
and wearing the fancy suit or whether they're on the street. It's all damaging to our economy and needs to be prosecuted equally.
Thank you.
I'll go. I think how you prosecute the types of crime were described really depends on the facts and the circumstances and it was a very broad question that you had, everywhere from pollution to fraud. And the DA's office needs to make sure that we are using every potential avenue for enforcement that we have. If you have a local actor who's committing local environmental crimes, the local prosecution might be it's the best method to make an effect here. When you start dealing with a larger scale corporate crime, you have to make sure that you're dealing with either you can prove that person was doing an act with the right criminal mindset, or if it's a negligent action, and that would dictate whether or not we're using a consumer protection action, which might be money damages, or jail or prison. But the reality is that we need to base that based on evidence, based on what the crime is. All of it should be on the table, and whatever is the most effective at creating an outcome. For some negligent corporations, money damages will be extremely effective, as well as injunctive relief.
One more minute,
But
AJ.
for some others, this threat of prison, when there is more than negligent action, but purposeful or deliberate malfeasance, then of course prison and jail should be on the table for all corporate actors. We can't solely use prison and jail for the poor. We have to do it. It has to be a remedy that is available for all types of crime, but it has to be fact specific based on the type of crime there is.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ready?
That's you.
Thank you. So I think I'll start with our environmental crimes. We are woefully feeble in that area. If you go onto our website today, we actually have one little blurb that forwards you to our environmental crime unit, and I use that in air quotes because it's one person, I believe, that shares that job with volunteers. And then it encourages you to fill out a paper document and mail us your complaint, and that's just inadequate. And I think we need to be honest about what we're doing and what we're not doing. I have asked, and we're mostly, for the most part, with corporate polluters here in Marin, just seeking fines. And even before that, sometimes we try, and for political purposes, working with other agencies within the county, just deal with it on let's resolve this issue, and if you resolve it and stop doing this, then we're not going to prosecute you and we're not going to fine you. We need to really reevaluate how we're handling these issues, because it is important, and it is the trickle-down theory, and money sometimes speaks volumes, but knowledge is power, and until we really go back and see how we're handling these cases, which, again, there's a lack of transparency about that, we're going to have a problem. So I do believe we need to focus on that. As far as white-collar crimes, many of those end up being federal offenses, and so oftentimes we wouldn't prosecute them. They would be factually driven on a case-by-case situation.
Coming up on the left.
In order for me to give any kind of concrete answer as to how we would handle those problems. What I can say is that people need to understand, a lot of times when you say prison, prison is really served in jail. So there's not a lot of difference between jail or prison on the state level in many situations, in fact, in most situations. I do think heavy fines are important because they can be put back into the community, and I also think prison and jail when it's necessary. And if people are affected, and we've had cases here in the past where real estate people and investment frauds that took away people's life savings, those people need to go to prison, and I have no problem with that. What we need to do is spend more time getting restitution, which I'm committed to that. I've recovered hundreds of thousands of dollars for
Thank you.
seniors who've been victims of crime.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that question. So this is just a simple yes or no, and you can elaborate it. Do you feel that the judicial system is stacked in the direction of people having money, being able to get themselves not sent to prison or jail, and that it is stacked for people that don't have money to be wasting away in prison or jail? Yes or no, and just a little comment.
Yes. It is stacked, and I think it starts back to the bail system, and I've seen the problems with it. I prosecuted sexual assault cases.
We'll
and-
talk more about
Okay.
bail as we go,
Yes,
but I
it-
just
yes,
want to
it
really
is
kind of get the meat of where we're
Absolutely.
coming from with this question about corporate crime and who's going to jail, who's spending 28 years of their life in jail
Agreed.
for something that they did
Agreed, it's
versus
stacked.
if you have money and you're not there.
Yes, absolutely, it's stacked, not only in terms of the quality of lawyering that's accessible to people, but the mandatory minimums, the types of crimes that have been, the statutory sentencing requirements have all been stacked in favor of those who have the money to manipulate the system.
AJ?
Yes, I do. I think that money influences the administration of justice at every level, and it's sometimes hard to understand how, even when you're trying to do the best job you can, how money is affecting your decision-making process, either as a defense attorney or a prosecutor, and I'm sure there's going to be follow-up questions to this one.
Thank you. I'd just like to say thank you for answering that question, and if I can just look out to the audience to say that, is that something that we'd like for our DA to really think about and focus on, is that inequity around money and being in prison or not being in prison because you have money, not being in prison. Can we get some support for that? Thank you. Okay. So let's move on to immigration. What do you see as the DA's role in protecting Marin's immigrant community? Do you support SB 54, the California Trust Act, which limits the involvement of local police agency in immigration cases? As DA, what would you do to develop a trusting relationship with the immigrant community of Marin? So what we're getting in this question is your general sense of your relationship with the immigrant community and also the specific SB 54. Anyone can step in.
I do support SB 54. It's something that is very near and dear to me. It's one of the first reasons why I came to my platform of connecting the community to the courthouse, because I see the lack of trust of our office, law enforcement, by our immigrant community. And it's a huge problem. And that's why I've been out there from day one, attending meetings, continuing to attend meetings, and I have the trust and respect of many leaders in the immigrant community who are going to be walking precincts with me next week. And I think that's an important factor. The trust, to me, is key. And our crime rates are down. The next thing you know, the Board of Supervisors is going to say the crime rates are down. You don't need more police officers, sheriff, and DA. You don't need more attorneys because crime rates are down. But people don't understand the efforts that we need to put forth to get community trust. And that means getting out of our offices, everyone, out of the courthouse and into the community, letting people see our faces and hear our voices. We have a policy in the office that we are required to follow and consider the what can happen, the consequences of an immigrant when they have a case that's been filed in our office. Pretrial diversion is one way to avoid that. Another way to avoid that, sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
It's okay. It's all good. Take a breath. It's all right.
The trust is important. Working with the sheriff is important. I think having a good relationship with them is important. And I think that's all for now. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Lori or Anna, you want to step in? Or AJ?
Sure, no, I'll jump in here. I support SB 54. I think it's important for our state to make the statement in our county that we support the immigrants who have come here to this country. I take this personally in a lot of ways. My family is an immigrant family. My grandmother came here from Puerto Rico when she had escaping a domestic violence situation. Just herself with her 3 kids, she took the first step to get my family out of poverty, and I was the first one here to go to college, first one to go to college in my family. So we have between 14 and 16,000 undocumented immigrants right here in Marin County. And when the administration changed over in 2017, this community became shrouded in fear. The number of domestic violence calls, for example, coming out of our canal area plummeted. And that's not because domestic violence was over Unfortunately, it's because the lack of trust in our law enforcement that we've been dealing with for the last year. This is a whole community that's been driven into the shadows to the point where people are afraid to drop their children off at school, where my niece and nephew who go to school in Santa Fe are making plans for their friends in case their friends come home and find their parents not there. People aren't accessing food banks or health care. This is a safety problem for our entire community. And as the district attorney, we need to take the lead from the law enforcement perspective, saying, we will rebuild that trust. That means being out in the community, showing that
Coming
we
up on
care,
that 2 minutes.
listening, being part of it, and taking a strong stand, saying, yes, we are not going to deport someone for a broken taillight. That's not going to happen. Yes, we're required to take immigration consideration, deportation considerations into account in charging decisions, but we've got to go further and get out in the community and let them know that they can trust law enforcement in the DA's office again.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So AJ, it's you.
That's me. This is also near and dear to my heart as well. When I started at the district attorney's office, we had a famously colorblind policy as it came to immigration consequences. That is, we paid attention to disabilities, age, sex, gender orientation, but we didn't take into account immigration consequences. It didn't sit particularly well with me. I'm proud to have pushed heavily for the change in that policy, collecting the policies from other jurisdictions, which made up the policy which Lori just mentioned, that is, we've now implemented. We have a tremendous amount of discretion as district attorneys in what we do on a day-to-day basis. It is what affects people's deportability and inadmissibility. And while SB 54 is primarily aimed at other law enforcement agencies, DAs, how they settle cases, how they charge cases, is one of the largest component parts in what makes a person who intersects with the criminal justice system deportable and inadmissible. And that means that we need to be fluent. It means that we need to be nuanced in how we handle the cases in the interest of justice. The president could come in and could deport absolutely every single person who's here illegally. They could do it tomorrow. That's the federal supremacy clause. They can do that. It would be abhorrent, but he could do it. Until that happens, people who are less than fully documented are members of our community. They are working in our companies. They are working in our restaurants. They are working in West Marin. And until that changes, these is a population that we need to continue to serve and keep safe. If you're not comfortable with a DA's office that has flexible sentencing, is flexible at how it settles cases, but you're okay with having your nanny be paid in cash, you may be on board with structural racism. So we need a DA's office which puts this up front and is fluent in how to deal with the immigration consequences of how we do our job, and that has to be our primary focus.
Thank you. And AJ, do you support SB 54?
Yes, I do.
Specifically? Thank you. We're going to move on to police shootings. So I don't have to elaborate that California and across the nation is seeing just terrible increases of police shootings, specifically of men of color, black men, brown men. In this particular community in 2013, Shaka Gratian was shot 3 times by a deputy sheriff for driving away with a suspended license. How would you as DA proceed with investigation, the prosecution of police officers? Because often they get off the hook. They're not prosecuted. Any one of you can start.
Here, I'll start with this one. The Shaka Grayson situation was incredibly damaging for this community and for all of Marin, really. One of the biggest problems we had there, and what I want to fix, is the lack of independence and transparency and fairness in these types of prosecutions. And it starts with having a protocol that everybody follows every single time. Other counties across the country and across the state have done this. Develop a protocol in conjunction with the community and with law enforcement that goes up on your website, that gets followed every single time. And part of that protocol involves outsourcing an investigation to the appropriate jurisdiction if the local DA's office or the local police officers cannot conduct an unbiased and fair investigation. That has to be part of it. Also has to be part of it is an understanding of when materials are made public in terms of videotapes, any videotapes or other evidence, when those things are made public, there are multiple considerations here, safety of the officers, the integrity of the investigation, but put it in a protocol and do it in advance so that when the situation happens, the emotions are taken out of it and we know what to follow and we're going to do it right.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna. Anyone else want to jump in on how would you prosecute police officers that shoot, assault, or kill suspects?
So, for those of you that don't know, I have a police law enforcement background. I was a police officer. I responded to shootings before. I've been the first person at the scene of shootings, including shootings by police officers. And I understand it's a hot-button issue. And again, it comes back to the lack of trust and the history of shootings in our, luckily not in our local community, except for the one you talked about, but we don't want that to happen again. Transparency is number one, and also the integrity of the investigation. We do have a procedure set up in Marin County where when one agency is involved in a shooting, then another agency comes in and investigates it. Marin County Sheriff's Office actually responds to similar situations outside of the county as well. So I think an outside agency's investigation is important, that you're not investigating your own people. I think in the Chaka Grayson case, if I'm not mistaken, there was discipline and disclosure by my office of information that led to discipline of that particular officer, and I think that was made a public record. And that kind of thing has to happen. The transparency is a huge part of it. We do have to protect the integrity of an investigation, so
One more minute.
couldn't promise any blanket policy as far as issuing body-worn cameras. But as a police officer, a former police officer, I have the respect and the trust of the law enforcement community. And some people think I won't be fair, but it's quite the opposite, because I understand how they think, and they also respect me. And when I tell them they've done something wrong and something's not going to fly in court, or if I have to prosecute a police officer, which I've done in the past, it's respected. And I think that's the kind of DA you want to have, somebody that understands both sides of these pictures and the situations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hold on. We're not. Carrie, we're not in public address yet. You will have an opportunity to talk, and I'm going to pick you. It's okay. It's all right. It's okay, but we'll come back to that. Hold on to that.
I hear you.
Hold on to that passion in the question, and we'll go on. AJ, you want to comment on that?
I guess
How will you prosecute police officers?
You do. You apply the lens, which you do every single day, and you look at a case, and if you can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, police officers are subject to the exact same lens, exact same standards as everyone else. And that includes accountability. It includes accountability for their actions when their use of force exceeds what's reasonable. It's a standard that's existed. There is no greater standard for law enforcement. That means we need to hold everyone accountable. Everyone includes police officers. Now, we can get there, and I have had to prosecute individuals who have been in law enforcement for embezzlement and other crimes. It happens. You apply the same lens. You can't give privilege to individuals who are in law enforcement or the benefit of the doubt in how you interpret evidence. You have to do it with the same lens you do for everyone else. You don't overly punitive. You don't hold it against a person that they're in law enforcement, but they get the same lens. They get the same read as everyone else, and you have to be committed to that. And if you cannot commit to providing the same lens that you do every other piece of evidence, every other piece of
One more
case
minute,
that would come
AJ.
through, then you do have to have a different agency do that. Or if there would be the appearance that your agency couldn't apply those same rules, in which case you either get another agency, like the Sonoma County DA's office or the Napa DA's office, to make that commitment, or the California Department of Justice, because you don't want to have your decisions suspect. But you commit to applying everyone to the same standards, and I would make that commitment.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to the subject of alternative sentencing, and again, I'm going to ask you to really look at programs that include education and vocational requirements. So I think we can all agree that taxpayer money is better spent educating rather than incarcerating, even though at this point it is not. Are you familiar with effective alternative sentencing programs, specifically those that contain an educational or vocational requirements? And if so, can you cite an example that's attached to the judicial system right now? Yeah, yes or no, in citing examples. Anyone can step in and take that.
Sure, I'll start. The reality is the criminal justice system really only has one primary form of currency. You know, we get inundated with cases, and we want to treat everyone fairly, which means treating everyone as much as we can somewhat similarly. And the reality is most judges, most defense attorneys, most DAs have to find a way of treating everyone equally, and that currency is most often jail. And if you're not using that currency, you're using something equivalent, like community service hours. That's why most sentences look very similar. Some component of jail, some component of community service. It allows you to say, well, I'm fair to defendant A because I did something similar for defendant B and defendant C. And vocational work and employment is harder, it's harder for people to wrap their heads around, but it absolutely needs to have a larger role, especially if you want to break down cycles of recidivism. I'm not aware of any work your way off of your probation cases, but there certainly should be, because you want to have people have a good job, and you have more and more employers who will not have the barriers of, let's say, felony convictions. And you have more and more providers of employment, like, let's say, union workers,
Coming up on 1
who
minute.
are willing to look beyond some convictions and get great jobs, and we should be having more and more tie-ins for that. You know, when you just have to come to watch court once, and when you come and watch court, you'll have, and a person is pled guilty, they're found guilty, you have their term of probation. Second, you have their jail sanction. Third, you have their community service work. Fourth, their fines, and get a job at the direction of your probation officer. That's the only thing that's said. Now, if what we wanted to do was to encourage employment, that should be up here at number 2 or number 3, not an afterthought. Get employment at the direction of your probation officer.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So it sounds to me that, and I'm waiting for the other 2 candidates, that there's not really, I'm looking for examples cited of employment vocational programs that are attached to the judicial system, to this disparity that we were talking about earlier around that corporate criminals don't spend 28 years in prison, and that if you're poor, you could spend 28, 30 years in prison. If people had jobs, when there was more equity in World War II, when there were more jobs, there was less crime. So again, I'm really looking for examples here. And if there are no examples that you can think of, what would you be willing to do to work with community organizations or recommendations for there to be programs in the community that address that? As AJ was saying, that like up top.
Right. I think you hit the nail on the head. Can't think of anything specifically out of our Marin County Courthouse other than maybe in our mental health court. We do work hard to find employment opportunities for our clients in that program. And that's really off the top of my head the only one I can think of. I'm aware of, on a statewide level, corporate sponsors who employ people when they've been released from prison and give them opportunities in the computer world and other, I think also Salesforce does as well. So I think those are the kind of partnerships we need to make on a local level with, we have many corporate entities in Marin County who I'm sure have just never been approached with this option and opportunity for both sides. So I think that's something we should look at, and I think it's a brilliant question actually, and unfortunately it has been overlooked. One thing I do support is understanding that there is not a lot of support for people when they're released from prison or jail, and I think that's a huge problem. I have been a big proponent of a program called the GRIP program in San Quentin Prison, and it's Guiding Rage into Power, and it's run by, it's a restorative justice program in prison. The graduates of that program, my first question was, most all of them have serious felony convictions on their records.
Coming on 1 minute.
I said, and how do we get jobs for these men? Those men go back in the prison and teach the program. And I think that's the kind of thing that we need to be looking at for opportunities for people. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, I also am not aware of any program that is running here in Marin and in the research that I've been doing around the state and the country that goes to exactly that issue. But I'm going to keep looking for that because that's a critical juncture of making sure that we prevent crime here. But I'm thinking further upstream, actually. Because when we get to the point where we have poverty that's entrenched, that's driving criminal activity, we've got to get to the root of cause of that poverty. And in many ways, it comes back to educational opportunities. Educational opportunities and making sure that our kids from the very beginning have the job opportunities, the internship opportunities that they need to stay out of the criminal justice system and making good choices. So yes, we as the law enforcement community should need to support programs where we are working with our business community, together with our business community, to get internships going, to make sure that people are hired starting young through all of our diverse communities in Marin. And that could start right away at high school. Let's build those programs. Let's make sure that our kids have the skills that they need to succeed as productive citizens and keep them out of that school to prison pipeline. That's where I'd focus too.
Thank you so much. Thank you for answering that question. So this is going to be the last question before we turn it over to Youth Court, who has some very specific questions about juvenile probation. As a district attorney, what types of crimes would be your priority for prosecution in Marin County? Any one of you.
Sorry, I would say number one is crimes of violence, particularly crimes that involve firearms. And I'm particularly concerned about replica firearms as well. I think we have a lot of people committing those crimes, and they're subjecting their victims and themselves to just as much harm and danger. So I think that would be the number one priority for me. I think number two is preying upon our seniors. There's a lot of that going on, and it's another crime that is just not reported. It's happening in our immigrant rights community, in our immigrant community, and I think all across our county in general. And also, human trafficking is a component we really haven't been looking at. Our underrepresented and underprotected people, including immigrants, are victims of that crime, and that's another one that almost seems like it's on a corporate level. But we really need to focus on that and ask our Board of Supervisors for resources to address that. And I think, if I didn't say it already, financial crimes and physical crimes against our seniors, because that's a countywide issue as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Lori, since you have a little more time in this, how many of these crimes that you're giving priority to do you think are related to crimes of poverty? Just putting that out there.
I think it's hard to say. I'm quite sure that domestic violence is not necessarily a poverty crime, frankly. I think it's an important thing to know that that crime can affect everyone, and the way we learn that is by encouraging victims of those crimes to, on a community level, go to one of our partners and really talk about what happened to them. And when I first had that caseload, I would go to those meetings at what used to be Marin Abused Women's Services. Now it's the Center for Domestic Peace, and it was amazing to me how a nurse or a doctor or a lawyer would look around the room and realize that, wow, this affects everyone. There is no face of a victim. So I think that would be, one stigma that we need to deal with.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Anyone else? Priorities for prosecution in the county?
Yeah, sure, I'll go next. So domestic violence is the most prevalent violent crime in Marin County. It cuts across race, it cuts across class, and that would be one of my top priorities. I do think we need to think about it in more broad way than we have before. I have been traveling around the state looking at family justice centers, which other counties have put into place, and it's this tremendous facility where all the services for victims are located in one place. Alameda's is the gold standard. Sonoma has an amazing one too. I'd love to try and scale that for Marin County. And it was started by prosecutors who found that they needed to support victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, and elder abuse in order to have more effective prosecutions. We have so many nonprofits in Marin County, lots of services out there, but we've got to consolidate them so the victims can actually get them, and that will support effective prosecutions. Environmental protection. The district attorney has been absent on, district attorney's office has been absent on environmental protection for a long, long time. There have been some regional prosecutions that have taken place that Marin County's missed out on. I want to be on the forefront of those types of prosecutions so we can make sure that our environment is protected and Marin County can bring in damages that we deserve from corporations who are taking advantage of the environment and of consumers. Those are two of my top priorities.
Thank you. Thank you for the answer. AJ?
So, I think ultimately your priorities as an elected official depend on the data which you're presented with. Here in Marin County, whether you know it or not, 87% of the crimes here are misdemeanors. We file 5,000 or 6,000 misdemeanors a year. 1,500 of those are DUIs. Then you have your drunken publics, you have substance abuse crimes, then you have thefts related to substance abuse. But by and large, you have broad categories of crimes, hundreds and hundreds of crimes, which are related to substance abuse of one form or another, or vagrancy-related crimes, crimes related to homelessness and poverty. Those make up the bulk of what we have in Marin County, and I think that has to be the priority of the DA's office if what you want to do is respond to the level of criminality you have in front of you. I think human trafficking is incredibly important, but we have 2 to 4 cases of those a year. And so compared to thousands of cases involving substance abuse, I think it has to be a priority. That being said, within those categories, you have people who are moving over and over and over through the system. So it's not like one crime, one person. You have people, and I know, having been in charge of our misdemeanor unit several times, we have people who are arrested 30 times a year
One more minute,
for
AJ.
drunk in public. And that's 29 failures in a row. That's interventions that are lost opportunities. There used to be a saying in the DA's office that I'm a DA, not a social worker. But we're all social workers, really, when you're talking about quality of life crimes, homelessness-related crimes, and we have to be aligned with other partners to break those cycles if we really want to bring down those really large numbers of substance abuse-related and homelessness-related crimes.
Thank you very much. So now we're going to open it up to juvenile probation. I'm going to pass this on to Don Carney, who is the director of Marin County Youth Court, and his distinguished team.
Thank you. So we've got disproportionate minority confinement both in the adult and the juvenile system. In the juvenile system, probation has done a pretty good job with their Reducing Ethnic Disparities project. With young people who are already on probation, they're helping them succeed and not violate probation. But what can the DA's office do to encourage law enforcement from throughout the county to give young people, particularly young people of color, the opportunity to have a restorative response prior to being involved with the probation system?
I'll start with that one. Since I've been a volunteer judge on youth court for many years now, I've seen the value, the really transformative value of restorative justice for our youth. And I've also seen the striking, really, racial imbalance in access to youth court. Right now, there are a number of different referral points into youth court. We have 12 different law enforcement jurisdictions in Marin. We have 11 different school districts in Marin. Referrals are coming from a number of different places based really on the subjective decision of the person who's making that referral. One thing we can do is to standardize that, to make sure that we have a standard procedure for referring children to youth court and that it is followed and adopted by everyone. That's going to take some work to get all of these different jurisdictions on board. I'm willing to make that effort. The other way we can do it is by empowering the community to advocate on behalf of our children. I've been part of an effort right here in Marin City to educate the community and empower parents and leaders to advocate for restorative solutions across the board, not just in our schools and in our criminal justice system, but also in the way that we work and in our nonprofits, how we use it every single day. That kind of empowerment will allow the community to say, when a child gets involved in the criminal justice system, no, this kid has to go to youth court. That pressure coming from both sides will get us where we need to be in terms of equalizing the racial disparities.
So I'll go second, I guess. In terms of expanding the use of restorative responses, and I'm glad it was said that way, restorative responses, because that is a broad umbrella. It's not just youth court, it's not just a restorative justice diversionary program. Restorative justice in general refers to a belief and an approach to crimes that says, what's the problem and how do we fix it? It can be manifest in any number of different ways, and one way which you could and they're essentially locally informed, or they should be locally informed and dedicated to a problem. It's everything from youth court to things that are called community standards boards. Some communities have got together, they say, members of the community, faith-based communities, they get together, have a group of 9 people. But they say that within these 6 blocks, and they say to law enforcement, if you get a vandalism, if you get a spray painting case, we want to hear it first, because this is our community. We want to be part of the solution. We want community service to be done here. We want repainting to be done here. And we want to understand that everyone within this area takes ownership of this problem. That means the community standard boards. That means that people are volunteering their own time to do those things. And it means that a person who's willing to commit a crime within a certain area takes ownership for that in a longer period of time. And I think that that's the type of thing that I see local pilots that we could grow to expand restorative responses for unique issues that are in clustered areas. And it wouldn't be the same for every area. It would have to be around defined problems in areas where people have a shared value system but want to take ownership over certain criminal justice issues. On the big things, violence, those sort of things, there's got to be a big refer to the DA's office, but there is nothing that prevents law enforcement from sitting on citations and referring it to a restorative response first. If an offender says, I don't want to do that, I don't want to see my aunt and uncle on the community standard board, fine, you can come up to the Blue Roof Inn if you want to. But the reality is there's a striking lack of accountability in the justice system, and pushing locally is a way to do it.
Thank you. I think the first thing to look at is to educate law enforcement, our community leaders, including people who are community leaders in here in Marin City and the Canal and Novato and other areas as to what happens in our juvenile justice system. And one thing that doesn't happen in our office is distributing that assignment of working with juveniles within our own people in the office. In 28 years, I think we're on our 2nd person who's handled that caseload. Can you imagine 28 years and only 2 people have handled that caseload? How can you possibly think your office is educated about what's happening with our children when only 2 people are in charge of that caseload? So that's one thing that's going to change. So the education would have to come from outside our office and into the community, to community leaders and law enforcement and our teachers. I would love for all of our law enforcement partners, and especially new officers who are hired, to have to come and participate and watch every one of our courts, youth court in particular, drug court, and also our star court, so that they really see and understand how it's working. And yes, there's going to have to be a commitment from their leaders that we will use youth court and a diversion from the justice system before we pull that trigger and push them into the system, which we know is not always helpful at the end of the day. So I think collaboration is huge. I also think community leaders can be a huge component of this, and putting pressure and letting your police chief know, hey, I'd like to, like maybe when they have those programs that people go through the police academy at the local areas, maybe going to youth court and observing it should be a part of that. So I think knowledge is power in this area, and I think that's really what we need to do, is get out there and let people know the good things that youth court and the other restorative justice programs do.
Hello. I'm a high school student at TAM, and as a junior, college is right now almost everything I'm thinking about. As most of my peers, it's the same thing. I have some friends who live in the Canal and in the Marin City, and they have had infractions and misdemeanors almost identical or very similar to mine, but they don't get off the hook. And a lot of my other peers, with us just being white, do. Why in Marin is this happening, and what do you think are the steps of integrating people of color and everyone else who lives in Marin and who should have the exact same opportunities? And a follow-up question is, there's a certain stigma around the law enforcement, at least through our school and many other schools in Marin, that they are looking out just to give high school students unfair chances and speeding tickets, and it's almost certainly like they're trying to work against us, and we don't have any law enforcement working with high school students at our schools. None. The only people we see as enforcement officers who come in and charge kids and take them away, and those are my 2 questions.
Thank you, Nico. Did they answer? Are they answering?
I just, may
I was outside, so I'm sorry.
may I ask, I'm sorry, I missed your name. Young man?
Nico.
I'm sorry. Nico? Yes. I'm sorry, thank you. Can you just explain to me a little bit about the citation issues that you've had friends that live, I think in the canal?
Yeah, in the canal and in Marin City.
And then you've had the same citations yourself?
Yeah.
So were they not, I guess I'm having a disconnect between, did they get any help in the legal system? Did they not go to Canal Community Alliance and get help, or community court, or?
They didn't
You
get
don't know?
any opportunity to go to youth court. No,
Okay.
none.
Right. So that is a problem, and I'm a big proponent of youth court, and I am well aware in the canal there's not referrals to youth court. I have actually asked that question of community leaders in the canal, and Dawn and I have actually had this conversation that my first question I asked was, I heard young men and women from the canal are not being referred to youth court, and the answer that I was told was they have their own restorative justice program in the canal, and that they're happy with that program, and they think it's working. Now, you're telling me it's clearly not on many levels. So Dawn and I did have that discussion that we need to move the needle, and if we need to go to the canal and hold youth court, or come down here to Marin City and hold youth court, I think transportation is a huge problem, and sometimes expenses. We need to bring that court to them. And I think Dawn said last week to me, we need to rub shoulders. We can't be afraid to rub shoulders and just stay in our own little bubble. And I think that's the way we're going to have to deal with it. But I'm sorry to hear that you're telling me that perhaps the restorative justice program for kids in the canal is perhaps not working as well as I was led to believe. So I'm sorry to hear that. But I think it can and should be addressed. And I think everyone's going to want to do that. And we are aware there's a disparity. Clearly in Marin City there is. And I think there's a willingness for us to participate and get things changed down here. The other thing about in the schools, we need to have, I think, again, it comes to trust, right? We need to have a school liaison officers, or maybe a non-sworn person in each school, so that there is that communication and that trust. And it sounds like you think you're being targeted, and I'm sorry to hear that, but that is the kind of thing that you need to report to the powers that be. Got it. Thanks. Thank you, Nico. Sorry.
Thank you, Nico. Okay, great. So I've been so strict about time because I wanted to. Oh, they haven't. Oh, they didn't answer.
Sorry, I
Oh.
talked too long.
I'll go next. We do have a myriad of different agencies covering many different high school districts, and one of the problems, and I'll just continue on from what Lori said, is, some schools have school resource officers. They're officers who are embedded in that community to serve those high school students, and each of them come from a different background, but the mission should be the same. I mean, we have different agencies, but they are there to be liaisons between law enforcement and students, and their goal should be to help alleviate issues as they come up, not necessarily to be enforcement on the campuses, and whenever possible to minimize the amount of referrals into the justice system, seeing if you can diffuse the situation. I have a lot of respect for school resource officers and what their role could be, but perhaps what you're describing is different approaches towards criminal law on campus, and I think it needs to be more uniform. Even if, let's say, it does result in juvenile citations, then the referral process likewise needs to be uniform as well. You can't have, TAM kids going and being able to, even on a sliding scale, buy your way out of a citation when other places cannot. So there cannot be barriers like money towards having a scot-free record. And even if you're putting work into it, the money barrier entry there can't be. We need to have a uniform process. But again, I think uniform school resource officers with a uniform philosophy can also diffuse those situations, or at least that's the goal of them. And I'd like to see that roll out. That's not within the DA's office budget, or even it's just something that we could push towards. And but we could certainly work on the latter part, uniformity of programming afterwards.
This is why, after 70 years, we need a change at the district attorney's office. Inequality in our criminal justice system, it's not like this is something new here in Marin County. This has been going on for decades, and we have not addressed it. It has not been a top priority, and we have not moved the needle. I have 2 kids in high school, well, one in high school, one about to go there. My oldest is 18, he's at TAM. I have a 14-year-old here in Mill Valley, and I see the disparities every single day in how my kids, who are kids of privilege, are treated versus their friends of color. And even in my own family, I'm from a mixed race family. I'm white, my sister's brown, my mother's brown, my grandmother's brown, my father's white. We get treated differently based on the color of our skin, and that is the unfortunate reality, and it is upon us to start talking about it, to take a leadership role, and in law enforcement in the district attorney's office, we need to say no more. We're not going to allow this to happen. So how do we do that? It means that we get together with our law enforcement, we diversify our workforce, we start creating policies that can eliminate bias, and we do it now. It's past time to address this issue and to take leadership on it. So thank you for raising that question.
Thank you, Nico, and thank you, Don and Mauricia, for this is really an example of what it's going to take to begin to change some of the structural racism that exists in the country and specifically in this county. Because if we're talking about economic disparity and it's starting in youth court, and if there's implicit bias along the lines of how the kids are being prosecuted, it's just, the corporate criminals are just going to keep not going to jail, they're going to keep getting richer, and the people are going to keep getting poorer. So thank you, Youth Court, for stepping up with those questions. So now we're going to, I've been strict about the time because I really wanted to give, this is going to end at 2, but I wanted to give plenty of time for the questions that audience have put on cards. Now there's a stack here. I'm not going to be able to get to all of them. I'm going to just tell you that right now. If I go through the cards and I don't get to your card and it's like 1:45 and it's just burning, then I'll come over but I might have to jerk the mic away from you because I do want to honor people's time. So that being said, can we just all stand up for just a few seconds and just stretch your arms, take a deep breath. So this is an interesting question. Given the fact that there's billboards all over, and I'm speaking specifically in Oakland and in San Francisco, that marijuana is now legal. And I know personally people who have spent decades in jail, in prison, for selling weed. And it's just a tragedy, and we just won't go into that. But someone wrote a question, how long does it take to expunge a nonviolent felony in Marin County or California? And I'm going to give you a minute to answer that question.
I'll start. It depends on the case. Usually when a person has completed their term of probation, they're eligible for that. And the public defender has a robust program where they file those motions, as does the defense bar. We do not. One of my platforms is to have a DA whose assignment will be the social justice DA. I'm going to ask for funding for that position, and that person will do mercy expungements, which is there's new case law where you can go back 20, 30 years if somebody suffered something that affects their immigration consequences. We're going to proactively ask to expunge and move to expunge marijuana convictions, and then also misdemeanor convictions that we regularly handle on a daily basis. I think In the last 18 months, we've had more than 600 that we handle just in our office. So it depends on what the crime is, but ordinarily it's after probation's over or if probation has asked for an early termination. So
Okay, we're right at the
I
end.
think that
Thank
answers
you.
the question.
Thank you, yeah, thank you for that question. Yeah, AJ or...
Yeah, I mean, an expungement doesn't take very long at all. I mean, there's a statutory mechanism for it. The issue isn't the time it takes, it's access to that. And it was queued up by a question about marijuana, and there's two different types of things. An expungement is a legal mechanism by which you can be restored of some of your rights and privileges, and your guilty plea is turned into a not guilty plea for a lot of purposes. So it's a good relief for a lot of people, but marijuana, that's a different thing. That was a redesignation. The law actually changed. So the reason why an expungement might take time is because we need to look at it, make sure a person's eligible for all these factors. Whereas under marijuana, those crimes, a lot of them were changed. There's not a lot of discretion for us to do, so it's actually even less time. It's why I've said that I would, if elected district attorney, just run the spreadsheet on figure out all the crimes that were redesignated down from crimes to non-crimes and turn over that in bulk to the court. I mean, there's not a lot of legal work that needs to be done behind it. There are different types of legal approaches, but in general, we need to be robust about, after a person has served their debt to society, restoring whatever rights, whatever privileges we can so they can go about continuing to lead
We're right at
productive lives.
15 seconds. Thank you, thank you.
So this is another racial justice issue. We know that the drug war disproportionately affected people of color. Those marijuana convictions disproportionately affected people of color. It's incumbent upon the district attorney's office and our whole law enforcement community now that marijuana is legal to provide every assistance we can in a proactive way to clear the records of the people who were arrested for those violations. And I would set up a table right here in Marin City in conjunction with the public defender and work through those cases, and let's move past this so that people can get on with their lives in a fair way.
Okay, thank you very much. Has there ever been proposed restitution for unusual pain and suffering for people who served time in solitary confinement or in prison for now these crimes that were illegal and now they're legal? Just 30-second answer. Yes or no, or you don't know about it?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not to my, I know for other crimes, there have been civil lawsuits afterwards, but not to my knowledge. That's a great
Okay.
question.
All right, thank you. All right, so audience members, I'm doing my best to read everybody's handwriting too. So if it's you wrote it, you can jump in. So Marin Grand Jury has criticized the Sheriff's Department for inadequate treatment of mentally ill inmates in Marin County Jail 2 years in a row. No changes have been made so far. What would you as DA do to make changes in the Marin County Jail for these mentally ill inmates? 1 minute to answer.
So that's it's an issue near and dear to my heart. I've been working in mental illness, especially with the jails, for the entirety of my career. I don't know that's necessarily true, although it's not necessarily transparent to the general public. It is true we don't have a lot of facilities in the jail for dealing with individuals with mental illness. They're mostly in safety cells, and it is inhumane, all those things. That being said, there have been a number of efforts, including the Stepping Up Initiative and other movements that cross-disciplinary groups, the DA, the Public Defender, Health and Human Services, and our mental health department have been taking to alleviate some of those concerns. It is in no way adequate. We need to have robust community solutions for individuals, especially individuals who are mentally ill in the courts and charged with misdemeanors as opposed to felonies, because it really turns it on its head there. But it's not true that we haven't done anything, and I understand why the public would think it's not necessarily transparent, but we are making efforts to bring up the quality of care for those who are mentally ill within our jails.
Okay, thank you, AJ. You were right on minute. That was perfect timing, actually.
I'm trying.
Okay, you can jump in,
I'll
Anna
go.
or Lori.
I think we all agree that jail's not the place for people with mental illness and mental illness problems. The issue is when they arrive in jail, what happens to them? And I think it's a lack of staffing to treat the immediate triage that's going on within the jail, and that takes a voice with the Board of Supervisors who handle the budget for the jail to get more staffing in there. But the priority has to be to get the person treatment outside of jail. And that's where the hole in the disconnect is. If we have people who are accused of very serious violent crimes, sometimes it literally takes months, sometimes up to a year, to get a person to a state hospital for treatment. So that's a big hole, and that's when a lot of problems arise in the jail. We can't force medications, which is something people don't know, so we have to go to court and get those orders, and sometimes they do alleviate the problems, but sometimes it's just an issue of being able to diagnose
15
what
seconds.
the person's problem is. So I think getting the housing and the treatment outside of jail is huge.
You know, this
Thank
is
you.
another reason why, after 70 years of insider DAs, we need to be thinking bigger. This is another problem that we've been dealing with for many, many, many years. I toured the jail a couple of months ago, and the sheriffs, they showed me, I saw where we're warehousing the mentally ill in our jail. The sheriffs told me a third of the individuals who are there for mental illness reasons. So we need to be focusing first on prevention. Why are we prosecuting these cases and giving long jail sentences and putting people in a place where they cannot be treated and have no hope of rehabilitation, and we're warehousing them at taxpayer dollars? That's wrong. That's wrong. We need to be working with the Board of Supervisors is taking some great steps right now to address this issue, but we need to be leading this from the DA's office, from law enforcement. This has to be a collaborative, joint effort of leadership to make the change here, and it's going to cost money. It means we need to find beds for people. But we do that by leading on the issue and convincing the public in Marin that this is something worth investing in. And it is. If you care about human rights, if you care about the safety of
15
our
seconds.
community, we will make the investment. It takes the leadership to get it done.
Thank you. So the next question, what's your position on accepting campaign contributions from police unions? I didn't ask if somebody else did.
That's all right. I'm, full disclosure, I would accept campaign financing from law enforcement. And I have had to return some money from people who have found themselves in the justice system, so we have to be careful about that. But I think, as a general rule, if people want to support me and help me get to the position that I need to be in a position of power and make the right corrections as a leader of the district attorney's office, I wouldn't make a blanket statement that I wouldn't accept money from law enforcement. I would clearly not accept money from gas people, or I certainly would not accept money from anyone with the NRA with those kind of connections. Thank you.
Thank you. AJ,
Here,
Anna.
I'll jump in on this. So, no police unions have yet offered me any money. So I haven't had to face that problem. But it does go to this broader point of campaign finance and independence. As any elected official running, we're in this world where we have to raise money, and it's lousy. It's lousy. Someday we can reform our campaign finance system and break ourselves away from this, but this is where we are. And we have, as a candidate and as an elected official, you maintain your own discretion and personal integrity. And there are no promises, make no promises to anybody who's funding my campaign, and I won't, because that's wrong. You've got to maintain the independence that's from anyone who's contributing to my campaign. That's the bottom line.
Okay, thank you for your honesty.
This is the part of the job that it is absolutely the worst. Whether you know it or not, Marin County is a no-limit jurisdiction, which means that people can contribute as much as they want here. I can run for governor, and the maximum is $5,400. I can run for Congress, it's $2,600. But here in Marin County, for whatever reason, it is a no-limit jurisdiction, and it has meant that for the three of us, that we have been hustling people for dollars. This is no way to run a democracy at all. There's no way, one, also to have a day job as well as do this. Ultimately, yes, you need to finance those lawn signs and those really annoying mailers one way or another, but this is not a way, whether it's from police or anyone, you have to maintain your level of personal integrity, and it can't affect your decision-making process. I also don't have any checks to speak of from law enforcement, but that being said, we need to look broadly at how long Marin can credibly, with its progressive values, claim to have a no-limit personal contribution here. It's ridiculous.
Oh, thank you. So the problem is structural and institutional, and then you're in it. So this question has to do, it sounds like a youth court question also. As DA, what would you do to protect our tweens and teens, young men, from their rights being violated by school administrators and police departments in their aggressive response to such issues as sexting and bullying, where they are being treated as guilty until proved innocent? And just before you answer, this is a very dicey topic, because bullying is a big issue in schools and people are very upset and angry about it. And how do you prosecute it? And are school administrators taking advantage of the situation to all these things come up? So how would you protect the tweens and teens from the administrators and police departments in their aggressive response to these issues of bullying, sexting, texting?
I'll start. I'm a school board trustee, a two-time board president and also the vice president of the Marin County School Board Association, so I suppose I'm partially at fault for aggressive responses to bullying and sexting. But the reason why is because people who are bullied and are sexted do so quietly. They are the victim. There is stigma around it. One of the things about bullying is that no one speaks up until it's too late. When things go too far, we have rashes of suicides. And there is a lot of pressure for us to be aggressive and diligent. That doesn't mean we want to trample people's rights, but these are crimes and things that happen, and kids suffer and silently. And so there does need to be robust approaches to sexting, to bullying. That does not mean the criminal justice system necessarily. It does mean that administrators need to be involved, and you need to have local solutions. I'm very proud to say that almost every school system here in Marin County has restorative justice options to deal with things as opposed to criminal justice or expulsion, suspension. But you cannot take your eye off the ball off of sexting and bullying. These are things that need to be dealt with head on. It is not okay to normalize sexting with our teens. It is not. And it is not okay to normalize.
Thank you, AJ. You're almost at the end. You can.
We're good.
Okay, we're good? We're good. No, that was good. Thank you. Lori or?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think, again, this goes back to communication and trust between my office not maybe being aware that these things are happening in the schools and youth court. We really need to get these kids in youth court if we can. Somebody asked me this question last week, and a lot of it goes down to the zero tolerance fear factor in the schools. Maybe that's something that really needs to be looked at again. I do agree, certain things with bullying and sexting, young men and women need to understand the dangers of that. We do have a program we take into the schools because I think knowledge is power. Letting the children in these situations understand before it happens the dangers of it, I think, is a huge component of it, so we don't get to that point where kids understand how dangerous it is. Yesterday I had a group of young men and women from Novato go through, they asked me to take them through the DA's office, but I took them to probation, to our Jeanette Prandy Center, and to our public defender. And the most meaningful takeaway that one of the young men said was, wow,
15 more seconds.
Thank you. I was really struck by that public defender telling me how difficult his job is when he has to take care of someone who has found themselves in a sexting situation, and the dangers that and the pratfalls that can come afterwards and the aftermath are so severe. So we need to go back to youth court. It comes to education and also prevention on the front end of really letting our young men and women understand why this is so dangerous, particularly when there could be immigration consequences, which people tend to not think about.
Thank you, Lori. Anna?
All right, so again, I have an 18-year-old son and a 14-year-old girl. And the issues that these kids are dealing with right now are so complex and difficult. It's a whole new world in terms of the conversations they're having, the interface with technology, and we need, as parents and as community members, to support these kids in a way that we can give them the tools they need to stay out of trouble, to have healthy relationships, and to have good communication so we can keep them out of the criminal justice system. And when they cross that line, it's the peers. It's the peers holding each other accountable that's really going to make a difference for these kids. So 2 things. One, I sit on the board of the Wellness Advisory Center for Tam High Unified School District. That's Tam, that's Redwood, and Drake. And every single 9th grader takes a course called an Affirmative Consent Workshop that's supported by the Wellness Center. It's tremendous. It teaches kids how to talk to each other
15 more
about
seconds.
sexual interactions. That's the kind of thing we need to do to get ahead of it. The DA's office is not there. It's not there. The one person they have representing law enforcement is a very well-meaning and wonderful teacher from TAM who teaches street law. But we've got to be there. We have to be there. We have to show the students what actually can happen and be part of that conversation so that we make sure when they get in front of law enforcement, we've got the right answer for them and we can continue to build trust with them.
Okay, thank you. So this next question is kind of a nice break. It's a nice question. So you guys can take a deep breath. What are the ideal qualities for a deputy DA? And how would you foster for a deputy DA, well, for a DA. For a deputy DA, I guess it's, what are the, did someone, who are, for DA, I'm going to just say district attorney. What are the ideal qualities for a DA? If you wrote this, then hopefully I'm saying it right. What are the ideal qualities for a district attorney, and how will you foster those ideals?
I'll start with that. So the district attorney's greatest power is the power of prosecutorial discretion. That means the DA makes decisions about who's prosecuted and who's not and what policy directions to take. It means your DA has to have excellent judgment and be in touch with the values of the community. The DA, we can't forget, is also a manager. The district attorney is running what is in essence a law firm with an $18 million budget and 80 employees. That means the DA has to have good judgment, not only in terms of prioritizing cases and substantive legal issues, but also running an office. I've done both. I was assistant chief of my office in San Francisco, managing 40 employees, 15 staff, and 25 attorneys. I know that the skill set it takes to try a case is very different than the skill set it takes to manage an office. The goal as a manager is to, within your budget, make sure that your office is performing at its highest. That means supporting staff, hiring great staff, and giving them the tools that they need to succeed. Those 2 are the most important things that DA can do, and I'm proud to say that I have the experience doing both.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, who is next?
I'll do it.
AJ, okay.
Thank you. This is a great question. I think it takes, number 1, leadership to lead not only our office into the changes we need to make, but also experience. And that leadership has to translate out in the community so that the community will trust you, which I've said, I think, time and time again today. It's a huge issue in solving these problems we've had. The DA's office is not responsible for the last 70 years of social injustices. We certainly have played a large part in it for sure, and we need to own that. And that's the kind of experience that you need from somebody moving forward to make these changes. It has to be somebody who has experience in the state system. We prosecute state crimes, not federal crimes. And somebody who has experience to understand our community issues. I've spent my life in this community and contributing to the community.
15 seconds.
Thank you. And I think somebody also has to have the vision to know where we need to go in the future. And it's important that you do have the trust and respect of law enforcement. So, sorry to say, sometimes we do have to call them out, but if you can't sit down at the table and have a meaningful, honest, and trusted discussion with law enforcement and community members, which I've been doing down here, I think you're not going to accomplish the job that you need to do.
Okay, thank you.
Just thinking about the characteristics, I think that the DA, at least not now and then for the next decade or so, needs to have. I think really what we're looking for is a spirit of collaboration. If you're looking about things that you're going to want to have to implement projects, to implement new developments, new approaches to criminal justice, you need to have a DA who isn't, who doesn't solely have that adversarial hat on. And it's a system that breeds adversarial nature as we fight for a living. But the DA needs to have the spirit of collaboration to work not against but with the defense bar, work not against but with Health and Human Services and other programs so that we can really break down cycles of recidivism and build things. Along with that spirit of collaboration, though, might be also experience doing those things. And I'm proud to say that I've done those over the course of my career, built many programs, treatment in lieu of incarceration programs, restorative justice programs here, so that we can build those into the future. It is hard. It is slow. It is easy to make campaign promises,
15
but
seconds.
building a program can take years through complex RFP proposals, and I'm happy to say I've done that, and I'm committed to continuing to do that for this community.
Okay, thank you, AJ. Here's a question. So we have a thriving bike riders community and lots of bike trails in the county, which is good. This question has to do with that. There seems to be a persistent issue with DUI drivers in injuring pedestrians and bicyclists in Marin County. What would you do to address this issue?
I think we need to go back to something that our only elected woman attorney prior to, hopefully, our future history, Paula Kamina, established a program called Share the Road. And she worked with the bicycling community to really establish trusted relationships and also let law enforcement know that we need to crack down on these cases. When they come to our office, we need to aggressively prosecute them because basically the bicyclists are have no defense when they're out there. If they're lucky, they might have a helmet on, which they should, but that's not enough protection for them. And I think that kind of collaboration is what we need to get back to and send the message that we're going to aggressively prosecute those cases, particularly when somebody doesn't remain at the scene. But again, that takes collaboration, which I think seems to be the word of the decade for all of us to understand and deal with and really live by in our hearts, and not just our talk. We need to walk the walk as well. Another issue with bicyclists is I'm involved with Nevada Horsemen's, and we've had collaborative programs with the bicycling community so that we can understand and respect each other on the trails, because a lot of times people don't understand the dangers we can put each other in if somebody's riding a horse and somebody's on a bicycle, that we've had many serious tragic accidents that can be avoided. So that's the kind of collaborative thing that we need to do. But when people commit those crimes, and whether they're drunk or not, and injure someone on a bicycle, if they don't remain at the scene, we need to aggressively prosecute them and send a message that it's not appropriate.
Thank you.
People moved to Marin. Oh, go ahead, Dana. That's okay. No, I mean, Marin's a beautiful place, and one of the reasons why this question comes up is because of the mixed use of our trails and roads. And we have today, maybe this place would be filled up if it wasn't for bicycle trails and rides. And I think ultimately the shared use is it's a blessing, but with that comes shared responsibility. And I agree with Lori that people are left defenseless on our roads for the most part when they are bicyclists and they are hit, whether they are DUI or not. So enforcement of the existing yield laws and mixed shared use laws as infractions, and developing alternate approaches when people violate the 3-foot rule or do other things before somebody gets hit is how you put in place practices about understanding safe distance around bicyclists. Now, we also want to have education about defensive bicycle riding as well in the community so that they're not taking up the entirety of the roads as well, but the reality is, in that situation, it's not a fair fight. a car who hits a bicyclist will ultimately create a great deal more damage than the car. So we do need to robustly
15 seconds.
enforce the infractions that lead up to people not sharing the road and then hitting bicyclists.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
So I am one of those bicyclists. I'm an avid mountain biker. I ride a tandem bike with my husband on the roads. My husband's a bicycle commuter. My kids all walk or bike to school. So this is a very serious issue. I've had friends who've been hit. So this is something I take very seriously. And it does have to go from both sides. As bicyclists, we take responsibility for following the rules of the road. We must do that, take that responsibility on ourselves. The other piece is, as a driver, we do not do as good a job as we need to of educating our drivers. So my son got his driver's license 2 years ago, right? When you're 16, that's very young to be driving. There was very little bicycle education in our 16-year-old DMV education component. There's not enough. We got to start right there. Teach our kids when they're first learning how to drive, how to be safe around bicycles. We start there. And then, yes, we enforce the rules that are out there for drivers who are clipping bicyclists, who are opening their car doors into bicyclists, and for sure, anyone who's driving under the influence. That's a whole nother category of issues we need to deal with, which is taking seriously our DUI problem, which we have in this county. But when it comes to bicyclists, it's especially dangerous.
Okay, thank you. The next question has to do with housing. Are you prepared to prosecute landlords who violate statutes requiring safe and fair housing? 1 minute.
I'm sure you're going to get the same answer from all of us, absolutely. But it has to be reported, and again, that comes down to the fear factor, right? I'm sure there's many people living in situations that they put up with because they are afraid if they call out their landlord that they may come to scrutiny of immigration or law enforcement for some other reason. And I think that's the number one problem that we have. I think we're all going to be of the same mindset for that. One thing I am in support of is a program similar to what we have in Sonoma County, which is called the Palms Project. It's a wraparound project for homeless and veterans and mentally ill and people with drug addictions. And it is a collaboration between Catholic Charities and community partners. And I think that's the kind of thing we need to look at for housing for some of our people who are on the streets and need to have wraparound services.
Thank you.
Sure, yes, so we have a well-known problem in our county with the lack of affordable housing. And with safety violations and fairness violations, it's absolutely incumbent upon the DA to prosecute those cases. We don't have enough housing as it is, and we need to make sure what we have is both safe and everyone has access to it, regardless of the color of their skin. That's critically important. And you see, housing actually impacts our safety of our community in ways that we don't often talk about. For example, our first responders, many of our first responders, our law enforcement, our fire, they can't afford to live here in Marin County. And that's a safety issue that at some point we're all going to face, and hopefully it won't impact us in a bad way, but we're kind of heading down that path. So we in the safety community and law enforcement community need to understand that providing fair, safe, affordable housing is a safety issue for all of us and something we all need to band together to support.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah, we are all on the same on this one. I mean, fair and safe housing is so critical to our community, and it is a flip side of the equity piece as well. That is, it's not as if the safety violations or price gouging is evenly distributed between Marin City and Tiburon. I mean, it is primarily a flip side of an equity criticism. So we do need to be diligent about looking at all different types of the fair aspects of housing, and that includes pricing, that includes rejection of applicants on protected classes, and we need to be encouraging housing providers to not just create safe environments, but welcoming environments for all applicants of all different types. It is, when I've worked for the last again, 13 years in mental health, it's heartbreaking to have mental health clients who finally get a Section 8 voucher but can't find anybody who will actually accept that, even though it's the same as other money. So even when we have the inventory we have, it's not being accessed equally by those who would need it. So all of the people who interface with people who need housing need to be on the same page, and our office does need to have a leadership role in making sure that the units that are available are fairly priced, that they are, in fact, safe for all people, regardless of their background, regardless of their ethnicity, and regardless of their mental health, because there are so few units, they need to be of a proper standard.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to get right back into the judicial system and some structural issues. This is around money bail. We hinted to it a little earlier. In 2015, the median bail amount in California was $50,000, 5 times higher than the national median of $10,000. Will you support an end to the current money bail system and its replacement with a system equally fair to poor and wealthy defendants? So based on what people could actually pay? And how will you campaign, if yes, how will you campaign for such a change?
I'll start on this one. Many of you know that this has been an issue that I've been raising awareness on for a long time now, because in my experience as a federal prosecutor, the federal system does not have a money bail system. It was more than 50 years ago that Bobby Kennedy got rid of it because he recognized that it was unfair, unjust, and did not keep people safe. There's a movement now among the states to change that money bail system and move more to a risk-based system, which is where we need to be. A risk-based system will consider someone's dangerousness to the community and risk of flight, and judge the pretrial conditions based on those criteria, not on how much money someone has in their pocket. This is not something new. This is not something that California or Marin would be going out on a limb on. Kentucky's already done it. New Jersey has done it. Other states across the country are making their way, and in fact, other counties like Santa Clara have already done it. So Marin, we're close to getting there. We need to be there with leadership, the right leadership. We can get there, but it's time that we end this money bail system, and Marin should be leading on this effort.
Thank you. Thank you.
My first legal job was in the San Diego Superior Courts doing bail OR, pretrial release. When I walked in holding cells, it was AJ the OR guy. So I've been working in systems around this, and I've been a big proponent of ironing out the inequities around money bail. I had concerns last year about a bill that's pending, it's still pending, called SB 10, but overall the thrust is, yes, there's inequities in the bail system, and we absolutely need to fix them. And in the interim, there was a court case called the Humphrey case earlier this year, which essentially turned the justice system on its head. It mandated risk-based release, but there's been no legislation. There's been no funding. There's been no infrastructure behind it because the bill last year is still on hold. And so we are in a quandary right now. And although potentially I wanted to hold out for the most perfect bill coming out of Sacramento, my feelings on it are evolving that we need a bill now, because right now, courts are not expanding the pretrial release in the wake of this decision. In fact, they're detaining
15
more people.
seconds.
And I've checked in with my colleagues across other district attorneys' offices, and this is happening. So we need infrastructure, we need funding. I would love to have, I've mentioned it earlier, there's no pretrial services in Marin County. So we need to have those rolled out expansions in order to deal with risk-based assessment. And so we need a bill, we need it to pass soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we all agree the bail system, like many other things we've discussed today, is broken. And AB 10 had some issues with it. I fully support rescinding the cash bail system. What we have now that we received in December after AB 10 was pulled, which was the prior bail reform proposal, that is a system, a report that was submitted to the Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court who is the champion of bail reform and doing away with cash bail. And there are tens, I think 15 solid recommendations for bail reforming, doing away with cash bail, priorities being pretrial release, getting people to programs if that's where they need to be, getting people assistance so they can come back to court and not miss court, and safety is a primary factor of that. I think people that are scrutinizing a person's situation to see whether or not they should be released have to be experienced and have to have a set criteria that's been recognized to be safe for both the person who's been in custody and also for the community and the victim of the crime. So I do support bail release. It's important to know that in 2016, despite all the wonderful things we do in the county, we let many people out on their own recognizance with scram bracelets to make sure they're not ingesting alcohol. We refer them to
15
programs.
seconds.
Even so, in 2016, we had 1,500 people who did not come back to court despite those measures that we have for them. So we definitely need to get that going. And that money for pretrial services could come from our Board of Supervisors.
That was clear. Thank you. Okay. Did everyone answer? Did all three of you answer? Okay, great. All right, so the next few questions really have to do with, income, money. So I'm going to, as we go into your closing statements, I want you to take 1 minute in a system, in a perfect system where you're able to work with community, work across the board, and be able for the DA office to get the money that it needs. What is your ideal vision? What is rehabilitation? Right now, we see going into prison, people are locked up, and we know what the prison system is. And those of us that are people of color, specifically black people, know what prison is. What is your ideal way for a person who has committed a crime and they are poor to be rehabilitated? 1 minute each.
It's going to be different for every person, and that's where sometimes we have failed in the past. Every person has their own moment in time when they're ready to be clean and sober. Every person has their own moment in time when they're willing to make those changes in their life. So as DAs and probation officers and even our judicial system, we never know with each individual person where they're at in that spectrum of being ready for that change. We can't force a person not to have a mental illness. We can't force a person not to be homeless. So to me, big picture is what does it take for each individual person so that they don't come back to us again through the judicial system. And it's different for every person, but we know that jail is not the answer. We know that housing is an important topic, as is education and opportunity. That's what I think it is, and that's usually my answer to people is, here's the problem. With this specific person, what is it going to take to get them to a place where they can move on with their lives and be safe for themselves, safe to our community, and that this doesn't happen again, that they're not in this situation again.
Can you just take a moment to speak on, because I got you speaking on the individual, like what is the individual going to do to,
Right.
Can you speak about the structure of rehabilitation? What would a perfect structure of rehabilitation in the state of California look like to you?
Oh, and
How would that be different than it is now?
in the state, it would have to be
Or in the county, but people go from jail here in the county and they often go into the state prison system. How would do you feel like they're being rehabilitated in the system now to your satisfaction? And if not, what is your vision of how the structure would look different?
I think we know that they're not. I think that's really clear. And I think it would be an overhaul of every jail and every jail program that's offered, and every prison and every prison program that's offered. And I think we have to, in my mind, do it locally first, because to be selfish, that's the most important issue. But I think statewide there are changes being made within the prison system, but locally we can certainly do more. And again, that comes from really going back to what your grand juries reported and what people are reporting, and listening to people when they get out of custody, like, what could we have done for you? What was missing? Sometimes I find that's the basic question that everybody's afraid to sit down and say, what could we have done to help you? And that's one question I do ask people when they're in custody. So number one, if it's not working in custody, the first thing is to get them out, but get them into a situation, whether it's treatment or a program, something as simple as housing, and education. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but it's a big...
It's getting closer, but that's okay.
Yeah,
It's something to think
sorry.
about. It's just something to think about.
Right.
Yeah, so...
It's such an overhaul that's going to
Yeah,
be required,
yeah.
honestly.
I just wanted to get
so,
your gut sense of the system.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's broken.
Okay. So, HA or...
Go ahead, Ann.
Yeah, okay, I can go next. So, our prison system is based on punishment. I've been to many prisons, and federal prisons, state prisons, and the conditions that I've witnessed are frankly inhumane. The privatization of prisons is a problem. It dovetails with the mass incarceration. So if we truly want a rehabilitative system, which is where we need to go, we can look at other countries who've done it. Countries in Scandinavia have done it. They've got prisons where people go to get the services they need, to get the support that they need, so that when they come back out, they are functional, productive, healthy citizens of society. It is going to take a massive movement and a mindset in the American public to do this, but this is where we have to go, because at the end of the day, 95% plus of people who are going into our prisons are coming back. They're coming back out, and it's our responsibility to make sure that when people come back out, they're in a place where they're healthy, productive. And that's going to take leadership from all levels of law enforcement, from all levels of our
15
judicial
seconds.
system and our legislative system. But we each have to take responsibility, especially as leaders in our community, as a district attorney, to push for those types of reforms and the money that goes with it, and changing our popular culture so we can make our whole community safer.
Thank you. AJ, you.
So,
Last word.
Last word. Oh, wow. Look, understanding that what causes individuals to be incarcerated and suffer through mass incarceration is a myriad of factors, of which criminal justice involvement is one. And you're also talking about education, health, poverty, and we exist on a continuum of risk factors. And as district attorney, it should be our job to work part and parcel along that continuum in a system of rehabilitation. Since you're asking pie in the sky, we address every single aspect of that, so that when a person comes into any risk factor, you're also analyzing for solutions for education, for employment, for housing, and it is a coherent push. I personally think from my lane, criminal justice, the shape of what that looks like is more restorative, is more accountability at a local level, face-to-face, what a harm is and what that solution is. You see those restorative responses in prisons as afterthoughts, where you have victims come in and tell offenders in prison, like through Inside Prison Project, what the effects are. But this is years and decades down the line. For myself, within my part of the continuum, restorative responses earlier in a criminal history is a way which we can help alleviate in that continuum.
15 seconds.
And, okay.
No, that's good. That's great. So you can take a deep breath, because these are your final closing comments. And you can take, so are we okay with ending 10 minutes over? We're supposed to end at 2? Are we okay? Just to... right. Are you okay with ending at 10 after 2? Right. Well, but we want to honor people's time, and I think that it sounds like we got a lot of good questions in, and we want to honor everyone's time and have you close your closing statements, things that you really want to say to the community. This is your opportunity to say it to this Southern Marin community and others that have come. And either one, step
Oh,
up.
I thought you were calling on it.
And you'll have 2 minutes.
Well, I'll start, since I wouldn't last long.
Okay.
I want to, again, thank everyone for coming out today. This is a really important choice, and it's also a very difficult choice, I think, for people to make. I mean, you haven't had to make it in a long time, but it also is a very technical job as well, the choice for your next district attorney. And so I think I applaud you for spending a Saturday for doing this. For myself, I'm not particularly accomplished as a politician. I talk too fast, if you can't tell. Maybe I tell too many jokes as well. as we sit into this election, it's not my skills as a politician that's gotten me the support of my colleagues, the Marin County Prosecutors Association. It's certainly not that skill set that got me the support of almost every current practicing criminal defense attorney as well. I'd invite you to, as you're making your choice for district attorney, reach out to people who are currently practicing in the criminal justice arena and ask them who they're backing and ask them why. Or ask victims or defendants who have gone through the system, because I've been in this community for a long time. I've touched a lot of people, and I trust, hopefully, that I put out there something positive. I hope if you ask them, I hope they'll say that I've served this community with honesty and integrity, and that I've tried to build programs, not just prosecutions, for people, for all individuals, for victims, but also for defendants, and for our children, for our seniors, for our veterans. I've been doing this long before there was an election, long before, I suppose, there were video cameras watching all of us. But you know, I was raised, your feet do the talking. So I think my feet have talked. I'm committed to this community, and I'm committed to that vision of Marin County as a progressive prosecutor's office, and I'd love your support.
Thank you very much, AJ.
So thank you for the opportunity. I do appreciate it. It's important to know that your next district attorney is going to be a leader in change. It should be somebody who knows the system, knows the community partners, has put the effort in the past to keep this community safe. I have more than 100 jury trials that I've handled. I've handled almost every caseload there is in the county, and that's an important knowledge base that I take forward when I go to the table to talk to community partners. I also have worked graveyard shifts pushing papers and police departments, and I've seen all aspects of law enforcement. I've worked for some great leaders, and I've learned many things, good and bad, from each of them and how they should proceed forward. I think that's an important factor to take into account, is the experience, the hands-on experience of your next DA, somebody who's actually taken a call in the middle of the night during search warrant duty and advised officers how to handle situations, who's going to know what to do when there is a critical incident and an officer calls for advice. So that's why I have the support of the sheriff, and I have a good relationship with him. It's a trusting relationship, and it's a respectful relationship. Some people think that's a bad thing. I think that can be a good thing, because that's who we need to partner with, along with our other law enforcement agencies, in moving forward and making change. So I think experience is important, and I think it should be well considered by you. Also, somebody who actually had the foresight to not be afraid to say what they're going to do as your next district attorney. Please take the time to look at my platform, which is put forth here. I'm not afraid to come into the community and answer tough questions and say what I'm going to do. I'm not the anointed one, but I am supported by our non-attorneys in the office, which I think is a really huge factor. It goes back to that equity in my heart, that the staff in the office knows where I'm at, what I'm going to do, and they trust me with their future, and I hope you trust me with your future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lori Frugoli. So we'll end with final statement from Anna Pletcher.
Thank you. Yes, thank you all for sitting here and listening to all of these challenging questions and really important issues. Again, I come back to this place where it's been 70 years. 70 years since we've had a fresh voice and a new perspective at the district attorney's office. There are issues that have been lingering in our county for so long. We talked about some of them today: domestic violence, racial inequality, fixing our bail system. Now is the time to do it. We have this great opportunity with a fresh perspective and new ideas. After 10 years as a federal prosecutor and managing my office, I know how to take that vision and make it a reality. And that's what we need to do here right now. And, you know, I live in Mill Valley, and it's been many years that I've been working away right here in this community, in fact. I started a program to teach the Constitution to kids, and I've been in Marin City at MLK for 6 years. I've seen what's been going on there. I've seen how much our community needs leadership and needs support from law enforcement so that we can pull together and bring Marin forward into the 21st century. That's what I'm here to do. And I'm so proud to be supported by the Marin Democratic Party, by the Sierra Club,
1 more minute,
by Indivisible Marin, and by local leaders across the county, Congresswoman Lynn Woolsey, a number of local electeds, retired Judge Faye Diopol. These are all people who are standing with me because they believe that we can bring this new vision to Marin and carry us forward into the future. So I'm honored to be speaking in front of all of you today and hope to be able to earn your support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Anna. So let's give it up for AJ Brady, Lori Frugoli, and Anna Pletcher, running for the Department of District Attorney of the County of Marin. And thank you all so much for coming.